They say love makes you blind. They say trust is the foundation of marriage. They say when you give someone your whole heart, they'll cherish it forever. Well, let me tell you something, they lied. Every single one of those pretty words, those romantic notions we cling to like lifelines in the storm of life, they're nothing but beautiful lies wrapped in the cruelest deception. My name is Wei Ran, and this is the story of how I discovered that the man I loved, the man I married, the man I trusted with everything I had, was nothing more than a parasitic leech who saw me as nothing but a walking bank account. This is the story of betrayal so deep it carved scars into my soul. This is the story of how I lost everything and found myself again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, or rather, where it all fell apart. It was supposed to be just another day. A day like any other in my carefully constructed life of denial and illusion. That morning started like so many others had over the past 5 years. I woke up next to Juan Huainan, my husband of 5 years, and felt that familiar mixture of love and unease that had become my constant companion. He was still sleeping, his face peaceful in the morning light, and I remember thinking how handsome he looked, how lucky I was to have him. God, how stupid I was. How utterly, pathetically stupid. Honey, come back soon after work, I had told him as we prepared to leave that morning. My voice was soft, loving, completely unaware of the knife that was about to plunge into my back. I will miss you at home, he had smiled at me, that charming smile that had captured my heart all those years ago, and promised, when I finish my work, I will come back right away. Such simple words. Such easy lies. How many times had he spoken those same words while planning to spend his time with her? How many times had I believed him, trusted him, loved him, while he was laughing at my foolishness behind my back? You see, I was the chairman of Xingshi Group, one of the most powerful companies in Yunqing. My father had built that empire from nothing, and when he died, he left it all to me. Every brick, every contract, every success, it was my family's legacy, my father's blood and sweat crystallized into corporate form. And Juan Huainan? He was nothing when I met him. Nothing but a charming smile and empty promises, but I loved him. God help me, I loved him so much it hurt. I loved him enough to ignore the warning signs. I loved him enough to make excuses for his constant need for money. I loved him enough to give up my own identity, to let people think he was the chairman, to stand in the shadows while he basked in the glory of my achievements. What kind of pathetic fool does that make me? That day, I had made a decision that seemed so innocent at the time. I had been thinking about my father's winery. The Lilac Estate, a place filled with memories of my childhood, of walking through the vineyards with my father as he explained the art of winemaking, the patience required to create something truly exceptional. The winery held a collection of rare wines worth hundreds of millions of yuan. Each bottle was a treasure, carefully selected by my father during his travels around the world. I had told Huainan that I wanted to manage the winery myself. This is Dad's legacy, I had explained to him, my heart full of daughterly devotion and completely blind to his schemes. It holds rare wines worth hundreds of millions. I should manage it myself, and he had agreed so readily, playing the role of supportive husband with an Oscar-worthy performance. Honey, you are so good to me, he had said, and I had believed the warmth in his voice was genuine. If I can ease your load, no work feels hard to me. How those words mock me now. How every memory of his tenderness has been tainted with the poison of truth. He wasn't being supportive, he was calculating. He wasn't being loving, he was manipulating. Every word, every gesture, every moment of seeming devotion was nothing but a performance designed to keep me compliant, keep me giving, keep me blind. But that day, something else was happening. Something I wouldn't discover until much later. While I was having that conversation with my husband, while I was trusting him with my inheritance and my heart, he was making plans with his mistress. His mistress. Even now, the word tastes like acid on my tongue. Her name was Xiao Shanshan, and she was everything I apparently wasn't. Younger, I suppose. More demanding. More manipulative in her own way. A perfect match for a man like Juan Huainan, though I didn't know it then. She had called him that very morning, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she made her demands. "Honey, today is my birthday," she had whined to my husband, like a spoiled child demanding candy. "Will you spend it with me? I can't wait to tell my classmates my boyfriend is the head of Shingsher Group," and there it was, laid bare in her own words. She didn't love him. She loved what she thought he was, a wealthy, powerful man who could elevate her status among her peers. And whine on? He ate it up like the vain, shallow creature he truly was. He loved being seen as successful, powerful, important. Never mind that every bit of that power came from me, from my family, from my money. He wore my success like a stolen coat and preened in it. He had bought her a Hermes bag. 2 million yuan. 2 million of my money, spent on a gift for his mistress. When I think about how I had scripted and saved in my personal life, how I had been so careful with expenses because I wanted to be responsible, wanted to honor my father's legacy by being a good steward of what he had built, and all the while, my husband was throwing millions at his side piece. The rage that fills me even now is almost choking, but it gets worse. Oh, it gets so much worse. Shanshan had asked him for something specific. "Can I throw a birthday party at the winery?" she had asked, her voice calculating beneath the baby talk sweetness. "You cannot be with me, so I must find another way to show my classmates that my boyfriend is rich and treats me well," and he had agreed. My husband had agreed to let his mistress throw a party at my father's winery, the place that held my most precious memories, using my wine collection as props for her petty social climbing. He had agreed to desecrate the one place that was most sacred to me. And he had done it without a moment's hesitation. "As long as my baby wants it, I will give you anything," he had told her. Those words, those exact words, were words he had once said to me. I remember because they had made me feel so loved, so cherished. Now I know they were just lines in a script he performed for whoever could give him what he wanted in that moment. I didn't know any of this yet, of course. I went about my day, focused on business, on being the chairman my father had raised me to be. I had an important meeting that day with Prince Emil, a major international client who could open doors for Shingsher Group in European markets. It was the kind of opportunity that required my full attention. My complete focus. Prince Emil had expressed interest in tasting wine from my collection, particularly the legendary 100-year wine king that was the crown jewel of the winery. "At the banquet tonight, I may have the honor to taste that wine king with you," he had said, and I had agreed readily, proud to share my father's treasures with someone who could appreciate them. I had no idea that at that very moment, my winery was being invaded by my husband's mistress and her gaggle of social climbing classmates, all of them descending on my property like locusts, ready to consume and destroy everything in their path. Let me paint you a picture of Xiao Shanshan and her friends. These were people who measured their worth in brand names and social media likes. These were people for whom appearances were everything and substance was nothing. They arrived at my winery like they owned it, like they had any right to be there, ready to turn my father's legacy into a backdrop for their shallow birthday celebration. "Cheers to Shanshan forever," they had shouted, their voices echoing through the halls that had once echoed with my father's laughter. "Shanshan, Mr. Wan treats you well." A 2 million bag, he just bought it, and Shanshan, playing her role as the rich man's girlfriend, had preened under their attention. "That is nothing," she had boasted, her voice full of smug satisfaction. "If I want it, he gives me anything. I'm taking you all to my birthday at the winery. It is my husband's own winery. Inside lies the collection of all top-quality red wine. Today, you get a taste. I will let you feel what it feels like to rule my husband's winery." She called it my husband's winery. The place my father had built, the collection he had spent decades assembling, the legacy he had entrusted to me, and she called it her boyfriend's property. The casual way she claimed ownership of something that had nothing to do with Ruan Huainan, the entitled assumption that what was mine was his and therefore hers, it makes my blood boil even now, but I still didn't know. I was in my meeting, discussing contracts and partnerships, being the professional my father had raised me to be. My assistant, Qiao Yi, had tried to reach me with concerns about the winery. She had noticed unusual activity, had seen that the doors were open when they should have been locked. But I was focused on the business deal, on securing the future of the company. I told her to handle it, to go check on things. I trusted my people. I trusted my husband. I trusted in the basic decency of human beings not to violate what wasn't theirs. What a fool I was. Xiaoyi arrived at the winery to find chaos. Shan Shan and her friends had broken in, or rather, had been let in by Huainan, who had given them access to my property as casually as if he were lending out a book. They were drinking my wine, touching my father's carefully curated collection with their greasy fingers, treating priceless bottles like party favors, and then I arrived. I had finished my preliminary discussions with Prince Emil and decided to go to the winery myself to select the wine for our evening banquet. I wanted to choose the perfect bottle, to show this important client the best of what my father had collected. I approached my own property, my father's legacy, completely unprepared for what I was about to witness. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The atmosphere was wrong. There were voices, laughter, the sounds of people who had no business being there. And then I saw them, Shan Shan and her friends, clustered around my wine collection like thieves at a treasure chest, but they didn't recognize me. Why would they? I had deliberately stayed out of the public eye, letting Huainan play the role of chairman while I did the actual work. I had thought I was being humble, being supportive of my husband. Now I realize I was just being a coward, hiding from my own success because I was afraid of outshining the man I loved. Why is the door open? One of them had asked. Could a thief be inside? A thief. They called me a thief in my own property. The irony would be funny if it weren't so enraging, and then Shan Shan had seen me. Wei Ran, she had said, her voice full of false surprise. What are you here for? What was I here for? In my own winery? The audacity of that question still takes my breath away. But before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, they had started their assault. I should ask you that, Shan Shan had continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness and real malice. In college, you were the campus beauty, Miss Wei Ran. I do not recall inviting you to my birthday party. You see, Shan Shan and I had gone to university together, though we had run in different circles. I had been focused on my studies, on preparing myself to take over my father's company. She had been focused on social climbing, on finding ways to marry into wealth since she clearly had none of her own. We had never been friends, but I had never been cruel to her either. I had simply existed in my own world, unaware that she harbored such deep resentment toward me, but now, in my own winery, surrounded by her friends, she had the stage she had always wanted. And she was going to perform. Come on, Wei Ran, drop the act, one of her friends had sneered. You must have heard somewhere Shan Shan's parties at a fancy wine estate, so you rushed here for photos to pose as a fake heiress. Fake heiress. They called me a fake heiress. Me, who actually owned the place. Me, whose father had built everything they were standing in. Me, who had more right to be there than any of them. But they didn't know. They couldn't know. Because I had hidden myself away, had let my husband take credit for my achievements, had made myself invisible in the name of being a good wife. Wei Ran, I recall back in school, do you not always carry designer bags and drive sports cars? Another one had chimed in, her voice full of mock sympathy. Why now even a birthday party you have to crash too? Oh, I get it now. Getting old and washed up, huh? Dumped by your sugar daddy? Sugar daddy. They thought I had a sugar daddy. They thought the bags and cars my father had bought me, the lifestyle I had earned through my own work and inherited through my family's success, came from selling myself to some man. The assumptions they made, the way they looked at me with such contempt and pity, it was like being stabbed with dozens of tiny knives, and Shan Shan, oh Shan Shan was loving every moment. What good is being smart, she had said, her voice full of triumphant cruelty. Still need clear eyes to pick a good man. We are all classmates, but our Shan Shan's different. She is about to be the chairman's wife, the chairman's wife. She was bragging about being the chairman's wife. The position that was legally actually mine, and she was claiming it as her future. The delusion would be comical if it weren't so personally devastating. This woman, this shallow, grasping creature, thought she was going to take my place. Thought she was going to be the chairman's wife because she was sleeping with my husband, and then she had made her magnanimous offer, like a queen bestowing favor on a peasant. Then how about this? This table's wine, drink it all. I can be merciful, let a fake like you stay to crash my birthday. She wanted me to drink the wine, my wine, as penance for the privilege of staying in my own property. The sheer audacity of it, the breathtaking entitlement, the casual cruelty of her words, it was almost impressive in its awfulness. I had tried to maintain my composure, tried to handle the situation with dignity. I had asked them who had given them permission to use a private winery, had tried to make them understand that they were trespassing. But Shanshan had just laughed in my face. That is right, a private place like this isn't open to others, she had said smugly. But this one happens to be from my boyfriend as my gift. Folks like you are trash, not even worth selling. You got in only thanks to me, you should be glad, her boyfriend's gift. She genuinely believed that Huainan had the right to give away my property as a gift to her. She genuinely believed that my winery, my inheritance, my father's legacy, was something her boyfriend could bestow on her like a trinket. And why wouldn't she believe it? Huainan had clearly let her believe he owned everything. Had let her think that his wife, me, was just a name on paper while he was the real power. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold and calculating, a fury so deep it felt like ice in my veins. These people had invaded my property, had claimed ownership of what was mine, had insulted me in my own home, and they had done it because my husband had given them permission. Because the man I loved, the man I had trusted with everything, had betrayed me so completely that strangers felt entitled to treat me like garbage in my own domain. I could have revealed myself then. Could have told them who I was, could have watched their faces drain of color as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. But something held me back. Some instinct told me to wait, to watch, to see how deep this betrayal went. Because if Huainan had lied about this, what else had he lied about? If he was brazen enough to bring his mistress to my winery, what other violations had he committed? So I had played along, had let them think I was just a former classmate crashing a party. And as I watched and listened, as I saw how comfortable Shanshan was in claiming my property and my position, I began to understand the full scope of what had been done to me. Shanshan had bragged about the winery's details with the confidence of someone who had been coached. This winery is named Lilac Estate, she had said, reciting facts she clearly thought proved her connection to the place. It is said the first owner loved growing lilacs in the estate, so it got that name. It is centuries old now. The estate's wine collection has 56 bottles, all bought from abroad at high prices. They are top collection wines, she knew the details. Huainan had told her everything about my father's winery, had shared the intimate history of my family's legacy with his mistress. Had given her the information she needed to play the role of owner. The level of betrayal in that alone was staggering. It wasn't just that he was cheating on me. It was that he was actively working to erase me, to replace me with this woman who knew nothing of sacrifice or building or legacy, who only knew how to take and consume, and then one of her friends had confirmed what I had suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. Shanshan's boyfriend is Xingshi Group's chairman, Ruan Huainan, she had said proudly. Piss off Mr. Ruan, and in Yunqing, you will not last here. There it was. The full picture. Huainan wasn't just having an affair. He was living an entire second life, presenting himself as the chairman of my company, giving away my property, spending my money, all while I worked tirelessly to maintain the business my father had built. He was playing rich man with my wealth while I was the fool wife who didn't know any better, but I knew now. Oh, I knew everything now. I had confronted Shanshan then, had told her that Huainan was my husband, that I was the real chairman of Xingshi Group. And do you know what she did? She laughed. She actually laughed in my face and accused me of trying to steal her boyfriend. First you said my boyfriend's winery is yours, she had sneered. Now your people say my boyfriend is your husband. You take everything that's mine. Are you that low? No wonder you are from a socialite class. You throw yourself at any rich guy. Shameless, shameless. She called me shameless for claiming my own husband. For asserting my right to my own property. The cognitive dissonance required to make such an accusation while literally being the other woman is almost impressive. And then she had played her trump card. She had called Huainan, had put him on speaker phone so everyone could hear. "Hey, babe, someone is bullying me on your turf," she had whined into the phone, and I had listened to my husband, respond with concern and affection. "What happened?" he had asked, his voice warm with the care he had once shown me. "Remember that girl I griped about, the fake rich chick from college? I came to the winery for my birthday. Did not expect her here. She even claimed the winery. She wants us gone," she had griped to him about me before. Had called me the fake rich chick, and he had apparently commiserated with her instead of defending his wife. How many conversations had they had about me? How many times had they laughed together about the stupid wife who didn't know her husband was living a double life, and then Huainan had spoken directly to me, not knowing it was me, thinking I was just some troublemaker at his mistress's party. "I'm Ruan Huainan, Shanshan's boyfriend speaking," he had said, his voice cold and authoritative in a way he never used with me anymore. "You are the fake lady Shanshan talked about. Heard in college, you stayed out all night. Each time you came back, you had many new bags and shiny jewelry and flaunted them to beat Shanshan. I get it. Your action today comes from your vanity. Since you and Shanshan are classmates. Apologize to Shanshan now, then leave. I might let you go." The accusations he hurled at me, at a woman he thought was me but didn't recognize because he was too busy playing his role, were based on lies Shanshan had told him. He had believed every nasty thing she said about me without question. Had created a narrative in his mind where I was some vain, shallow creature who had wronged his precious mistress. The man who was supposed to love me, protect me, stand by me, he had become my prosecutor based on the word of his side piece, but I wasn't done gathering evidence. Oh no. I wanted to know everything. Wanted to see just how deep this betrayal went. So I had made a comment. Had asked casually, "You treat other women so well. Does your wife know?" And his response? How would she know I have a wife? Those words. Those 6 words. They encapsulate everything that was wrong with Ruan Huainan, everything that he had done to me over the years. How would I know he had a wife? Because he had hidden me so completely, had erased me so thoroughly from his public life, that he could conduct this entire affair without anyone thinking to mention to his mistress that he was married, and then, as if he hadn't hurt me enough, he had threatened me. "Since you ignore reason and piss off my woman, then do not blame me for being rough," he had said, his voice full of macho posturing and fake authority. His woman. He called her his woman. Not my girlfriend with any shame or hesitation, but my woman with pride. As if I didn't exist. As if our marriage was nothing. As if 5 years of my life, 5 years of my love and trust and support, meant absolutely nothing, but then something happened that changed everything. You see, I had been recording this entire conversation. Every word, every threat, every casual cruelty was being documented. And in his arrogance, in his absolute certainty that his pathetic wife would never find out, Huainan had made a mistake. He had recited his wedding vows. "Ran," he had said, using his pet name for me, "we have been in love for 5 years. Today, I want to end our long run with a perfect mark. I, Ruan Huainan, swear to the sky, I will love only Wei Ran forever. I will care for her and guard her. I will never let her be wronged. If I ever break this vow, may lightning strike me, and may I die badly." Those were the vows he had made to me on our wedding day, word for word. And he had just recited them over the phone, thinking he was speaking to me in private, not realizing that his mistress and all her friends could hear every word. Not realizing that he had just exposed himself in the most spectacular way possible. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that winery. Shanshan and all her friends, who had been so smug and confident just moments before, suddenly looked uncertain, confused, afraid. Ruan Huainan. I had finally spoken, my voice carrying across the phone line. "So you have lied to me all these years. And used my money to keep a mistress. You sure are something. The recognition in his voice when he realized he was actually speaking to me, when he understood that I had heard everything, that I now knew everything, it should have been satisfying. But it wasn't. It was just painful. Because even in that moment, even as his lies crumbled around him, my first emotion wasn't triumph. It was heartbreak. 5 years. 5 years of my life given to a man who had been using me from the start. 5 years of love and trust and partnership, except it had never been a partnership, had it? It had been a con game, and I had been the mark. Huainan had tried to smooth things over, had immediately gone into damage control mode. Baby, do not get mad over that trash, he had said, still trying to maintain his fiction in front of Shanshan and her friends. I will tell the butler to go now. No matter who it is, if they dare bully my woman, I will make her pay dearly, his woman. Even after being caught, even after reciting his wedding vows to me where his mistress could hear, he was still calling Shanshan his woman. The disrespect, the sheer audacity of it, took my breath away. And then he had called his people at the winery, had ordered them to remove the troublemaker who was ruining his girlfriend's party. He had called my staff, people I employed, people whose salaries came from my company, and ordered them to throw me out of my own property. Someone broke into the winery, he had told them, his voice full of fake authority. They ruined my girlfriend's birthday. I act as Xingshi Group chair, and I order you as chairman. Take your men there now. Kick them out of there for me, as chairman. He had given orders as chairman of Xingshi Group. My company. My position. My authority. He had stolen my identity so completely that he was giving orders in my name. Using my power to further his affair, weaponizing my own company against me, the rage that filled me in that moment was transcendent. It was beyond anger, beyond fury, beyond anything I had ever felt. It was a cold, clear hatred that burned like ice, that sharpened my mind and focused my will. I was done being the victim. Done being the fool. Done being the invisible wife who hid in the shadows while her husband stole her life. When the winery staff arrived, they knew immediately who I was. Of course they did. They worked for me, reported to me, knew that I was the real owner of everything Ruan Huainan claimed as his own. And when Shanshan tried to order them around, tried to play lady of the manor in my house, they refused. Miss Xiao, you got no right to order us, they had told her, their voices respectful but firm, and Shanshan, her delusion finally starting to crack, had sputtered in outrage. What did you say? Do you even know me? My husband is chairman of Xingshi, Ruan Huainan. I came here with him this morning. Did you forget? But the staff had stood firm. Miss Xiao, stop it. Private winery. No parties allowed. Leave now. The look on Shanshan's face when she realized that these people wouldn't obey her, that her boyfriend's supposed authority meant nothing here, was almost worth the pain of everything else. Almost, but she wasn't done. Oh no. She still had her ace in the hole, or so she thought. She had called Huainan back, had demanded he deal with the butler who wouldn't listen to her, and Huainan, his ego and his lies spiraling out of control, had tried to exert authority he didn't have. This is Ruan Huainan, he had said when the staff put him on speaker. I order you, throw the troublemakers out, I am sorry. I do not take your orders, the head of my security had responded, his voice flat and professional. I am the chairman of Xingshi Group Company, Huainan had blustered, his voice rising with frustration and fear. This winery is mine too. You are just a petty butler. How dare you go against me, are you sure? The security chief had asked, and I could hear the barely suppressed amusement in his voice. He knew exactly who the real chairman was. He knew exactly who owned the winery. And he was enjoying watching Ruan Huainan's lies collapse, but Shanshan and her friends were getting desperate now. The reality was starting to seep in, and they didn't like what they were seeing. So they did what desperate, cruel people often do, they lashed out. Let's smash her fake wine, Shanshan had declared, her voice shrill with panic and malice. Today I will find them all and smash them. This wine, each costs 1 million. You sure you will keep this dumb move? 1 million yuan. She thought the wines in my collection cost 1 million yuan. She had no idea. No idea at all. The cheapest bottle in that collection was worth more than the combined lifetime earnings of everyone in that room. And she was about to smash them. I should have stopped her. Should have revealed myself, should have ended this farce before irreparable damage was done. But I didn't. Because I needed to see how far they would go. Needed to document every violation, every crime, every bit of evidence I would need to destroy them both utterly and completely. So I watched as Shan Shan and her friends started going through my father's collection, pulling bottles off the shelves, examining them with their ignorant eyes, looking for the ones they thought belonged to me. And when they found them, when they found bottles that had codes matching the purchase records Chowie had shown them, they smashed them, one after another. Priceless bottles of wine crashed to the floor, their contents spilling out like blood, like the dying gasps of my father's legacy being destroyed by ignorant vandals who thought they were just teaching a lesson to a fake socialite. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the winery, each crash like a hammer blow to my heart. 10,000 yuan for each bottle you smash, Shan Shan had announced gleefully, bribing her friends to help with the destruction. Smash faster, earn more, and they did. They fell on my collection like jackals, grabbing bottles and hurling them to the ground, laughing and cheering with each crash, thinking they were getting rich off this spree of vandalism. Thinking they could afford to replace what they were destroying with the pocket change Shan Shan was offering. When they were done, when they had smashed dozens of bottles and were standing in pools of wine and broken glass looking proud of themselves, Shan Shan had pulled out a bank card. This card holds 200,000 yuan for your fake booze, she had said, throwing it at my feet like she was tossing scraps to a dog. Enough and more. The rest is my gift to you, 200,000 yuan. She thought she could replace wines worth tens of millions with 200,000 yuan. The ignorance would be laughable if it weren't so destructive, but I still had evidence to gather. Still had one more card to play. So I had told them about one particular bottle they had smashed, the 1992 Romani Conti, the Wine King itself, worth 10 million yuan, I had said calmly, watching their faces drain of color. What did you say? 10 million, really? They had stammered, suddenly not so confident, and I had shown them the proof. The international order forms. The authentication documents. The website listing from the auction house where my father had purchased it. Everything they needed to see to understand that they had just destroyed something worth more than most of them would earn in their entire lives. The panic that set in was immediate and visceral. These people who had been so arrogant, so cruel, so confident in their actions, suddenly realized they had made a catastrophic mistake. And they did what cowards always do, they turned on each other. Shan Shan, this wine I cannot afford, one of them had whimpered. You told us to smash it. The money, you must pay. Yeah, I cannot afford it. I have no money. Another had chimed in, all of them suddenly very eager to distance themselves from the consequences of their actions, and Shan Shan, her delusion still somehow intact, had doubled down. Just 10 million. My husband can pay it, she had said, still clinging to the fantasy that Yuan Huainan had the power and wealth to fix this. She had called him again, had told him about the wine they had smashed, had asked him for money. And Huainan, who was in the middle of his important business meeting and hadn't yet fully grasped the depth of the hole he was in, had agreed, it's fine. Just 10 million. If it makes you happy, I got your back, he had said, his voice warm with the false generosity of a man spending someone else's money. Take it. No matter the cost, I got you covered. He was promising to pay millions of yuan, my yuan, to fix the damage his mistress had done to my property. The circular logic of it, the complete disconnect from reality, would be funny if it weren't destroying my life, but then something had happened that Huainan hadn't expected. He had tried to access the money, my money, and found his accounts frozen. Because while all this was happening, while I was in the winery watching my marriage implode, I had been texting with my other assistant. And I had given the order to freeze every account Yuan Huainan had access to. Why is my card frozen? He had asked when he called the bank. His voice rising with panic. Mr. Yuan, sir, that is Chairman Wei's order, they had told him, and in that moment, I think he finally started to understand. His wife, his stupid, trusting, generous wife, wasn't so stupid anymore. I could hear him trying to call me, could hear the desperation in his voice as he tried to figure out what was happening. But I didn't answer. Let him sweat. Let him panic. Let him feel even a fraction of the terror and betrayal I had felt. Meanwhile, at the winery, Shanshan was getting desperate. Huainan couldn't send the money, her friends were turning on her, and the winery staff were making it clear that they weren't going to let this slide. She had asked for me. Had demanded to see the owner, still not fully understanding who I was. This winery, it is mine, I had finally said, my voice calm and cold. But still, nor one Huainan's. Then Qiaoyi had stepped forward, my wonderful, loyal assistant who had been gathering evidence this whole time. I am Qiaoyi, Chairman Wei's assistant, she had announced, and I watched as the last vestiges of color drained from Shanshan's face. Mr. Wan is married, Qiaoyi had continued, her voice professional and matter-of-fact. He has a wife. The one you think is Xingshi Group's chairman is not him. It is his wife. He is a total freeloader guy, the truth, laid bare for everyone to hear. No more pretense. No more lies. Just the cold, hard reality that Wan Huainan was nothing but a parasite living off his wife's wealth and success, and Shanshan, confronted with the truth she had been too willfully blind to see, had turned to her lover for reassurance. Honey, this is not true, right? How can you have a wife, she had asked, her voice small and lost, and Huainan, that coward, that liar, that pathetic excuse for a man, had admitted it. Sorry, Shanshan. I did hide it from you that I am married, but even in his confession, he was already working the angles, already trying to manipulate. But I had no choice, he had continued, his voice full of false regret. I love you deeply. My wife and I have no feeling at all. I always see her as a stranger. I just want her family wealth, then divorce her, so we can be together and make you Mrs. Ruan. There it was. The truth I had suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. He had never loved me. Had never seen me as anything but a bank account. Our entire marriage, all 5 years of it, had been nothing but an elaborate con designed to separate me from my money. And once he had gotten what he wanted, he was planning to discard me and install his mistress in my place. The pain of that revelation was exquisite. Sharp and clean and devastating. Because even though I had known something was wrong, even though I had suspected betrayal, some part of me had still hoped that there had been real love there once. Even if it had died. But no. It had all been fake from the very beginning. Every kiss, every tender word, every moment of seeming intimacy had been a lie told by a man who saw me as nothing but a means to an end, but Huainan had made a tactical error in his confession. Because while he had been trying to smooth things over with Shanshan, while he had been spinning his tale of loveless marriage and future devotion, Qiaoyi had pulled out something that changed everything. Is this not Miss Wei's pendant, once worn on her neck, she had said, holding up a jade piece. That is her family jade. She truly cared, it was the jade pendant I had given him on our wedding day. A family heirloom that had been passed down through generations of Wei women. Given to their husbands as a symbol of eternal devotion. I had given it to Huainan with tears in my eyes, had told him it meant we would be together through thick and thin until we were old, and he had given it to his mistress, had taken my family's heirloom, the symbol of my love and commitment, and given it to the woman he was cheating on me with. The desecration of it, the utter disrespect, the casual cruelty, it was beyond anything I had imagined even in my darkest suspicions. It is just a cheap pendant, Huainan had said when confronted, his voice dismissive. What true heart? She gave it to me, then it's mine. If I want to wear it, or toss it, or smash it, it got nothing to do with her. Cheap pendant. He called my family heirloom a cheap pendant. Called the symbol of my love and the history of my family something he could toss or smash on a whim. In that moment, whatever remnants of love I had still held for him, and yes, pathetically, I had still loved him even after everything, died completely. In their place grew something cold and hard and utterly ruthless, but Huainan still hadn't learned his lesson. Still thought he could manipulate his way out of this. When Qiaoyi refused to keep his secret, when she said she wouldn't let our kind boss Wei fall to a jerk like him, he had turned violent. Grab her, he had ordered, trying to silence the one person who was standing up for me. Who was refusing to play along with his lies. And his staff, my staff, people I paid, people who worked for my company, had hesitated. Because they knew who really held the power. They knew who really paid their salaries. And they weren't about to commit assault on behalf of a man whose authority came from nothing but his marriage to their actual boss. But Shanshan's friends, desperate and stupid and motivated by the promise of money, had tried. Huainan had offered them 100,000 yuan each to help him silence Qiao Yi, to strip her and take compromising photos that he could use to blackmail her into silence. If she leaks a word, I will make her a joke to all Cloud City, he had said, his voice full of vicious intent. This was the man I had married. This was the man I had loved and trusted. A man who would hire thugs to assault a woman for the crime of wanting to tell the truth. A man who would destroy an innocent person's life to protect his lies. A man who was fundamentally, irredeemably evil, but my staff stopped it. They intervened before Shanshan's friends could carry out Huainan's orders, and in doing so, they proved their loyalty. Not to Wan Huainan, not to the man who pretended to be chairman, but to me. To the woman who actually owned everything, who actually ran everything, who actually mattered, and then I had made my entrance. Not as the uncertain woman being bullied by her husband's mistress, but as chairman Wei of Xingshi Group. As the owner of the winery. As the wronged wife who had all the cards and was about to play them, I had called Huainan. Had listened to him answer with warmth and affection, thinking he was talking to the wife he had so easily deceived. Hey, babe. I was busy. Closed a deal. I missed what you said, he had said, his voice full of false intimacy, and I had played along. Had asked him about money, about the wine, about Qiao Yi. Had let him dig his hole deeper and deeper, promising to send me 100 million yuan, promising to fire Qiao Yi, promising to fix everything with my money and my authority. Before sending, look to your right, I had finally said, my voice calm and cold, and he had. He had looked to his right, where I was standing, having arrived at the winery to witness his corruption and lies firsthand. The look on his face when he saw me, when he realized that I had been there all along, that I had heard everything, that I knew everything, that look almost made up for the pain. Almost. It is you, Shanshan had gasped when she saw us together, finally understanding that the woman she had been tormenting was actually my wife, was actually the chairman, was actually the owner of everything she had claimed as hers, but her delusion was strong. Even confronted with reality, even seeing us together, she still tried to maintain her position. Bitch, who are you? Touch my man, she had said, her voice shrill with desperation, my man. She was calling my husband her man, right in front of me. The audacity would be impressive if it weren't so pathetic. He is my wife, Huainan had finally admitted, his voice small and defeated. Wei ran. The true chair of Xingshi Group. And there it was. The confession. The admission. The end of all his lies and pretenses. I was the chairman. I was the owner. I was the one with all the power. And he was nothing but a fraud who had been living on my generosity and my blindness. The reactions of Shanshan's friends were almost comical. These people who had been so confident, so cruel, so eager to destroy what they thought was fake wine and humiliate a fake socialite, suddenly realized they had attacked the most powerful woman in Yunqing. They had smashed tens of millions of yuan worth of property belonging to someone who could destroy their lives with a phone call. We're done. We can't pay, they had whimpered. All their bravado gone, all their cruelty turned to terror, and Shanshan, still clinging to her fantasy, had turned to Huainan for salvation. My man's winery. All wine is his. Baby, say something, will you? She had begged, not understanding that Huainan had no power, no authority, no ability to save her from the consequences of her actions. I had Qiao Yi calculate the damages. 53 million yuan. 53 million yuan worth of irreplaceable wine, destroyed by ignorant vandals who thought they were smashing fake bottles worth a few 100,000 at most. 53 million? How can it be so much? Shanshan had gasped, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done. That Shan could be a mistress forever and still not pay it off, someone had muttered, and truer words were never spoken, but Shan still had one card to play, one last desperate attempt to avoid consequences. She had tried to guilt me into letting it go, had tried to use my position and reputation against me. They say never air dirty laundry, she had said, her voice calculating. And you are the chairman of Xingshi Group. If this gets out, it will shame you badly. You're not short on money. Or give them money and shut them up. Be the bigger one, let it go, let it go. She wanted me to let it go. To absorb the 53 million yuan loss, to ignore the desecration of my father's legacy. To pretend that my husband hadn't been living a double life and stealing from me for years, all so that I wouldn't be embarrassed by the revelation that I had been cheated on, the assumption that I should protect my cheating husband and his mistress from the consequences of their actions, that I should pay for the damage they caused, that I should be the one to absorb the shame and the loss, was so perfectly in character for these people that I almost laughed. Because of course they thought I should take the hit. Of course they thought the wronged party should be the one to compromise. That's how these parasites think. That's how they've always thought, but I was done compromising. Done absorbing. Done being the understanding wife who makes everything easy for everyone else. You want me to just let it go and forgive? I had said, my voice sharp with contempt. Wan Huainan. You really make me sick. You are the one who cheated. Using my title as Xingshi chair, you bossed around. It was you too, so bold, who brought the mistress home. Still you again. How dare you say I should act like nothing ever happened, and Huainan, faced with the full force of my anger, had tried to grovel. Huainan. All you own, from Wei. You live well now, all from Mr. Wei. You are shameless, someone had said, speaking the truth everyone had been too polite to say before, honey. My fault. Give me one more chance, Huainan had begged, dropping to his knees in front of everyone. I promise. Last time. Can you forgive me? But I was beyond forgiveness. Beyond second chances. Beyond anything but cold, calculated retribution. I will never forgive you, Wan Huainan, I had said, my voice as cold as winter. Let us divorce, and he had panicked. Because Wan Huainan, for all his scheming and manipulation, had overlooked one crucial detail. He had been so focused on living the high life on my money, so consumed with maintaining his charade of success, that he had forgotten to protect himself legally. We love deeply. How can you say divorce? He had tried, his voice desperate. I know now. I was wrong. I will change. Why not come home first? We'll talk at home. Punish me as you wish. I will obey, but I was not going to be swayed by tears and promises. Not this time. Not ever again, Wan Huainan, I am not joking, I had said, my voice steady and sure. Tomorrow, I will ask my lawyer to draft divorce papers. I want you to leave with nothing, and that's when Shan had made her move. Clever girl that she was, she had realized that Huainan's value to her depended entirely on his access to my money. So she had faked a medical emergency, had clutched her belly and cried out in pain, forcing Huainan to choose between comforting his mistress and salvaging his marriage. He had chosen her. Of course he had chosen her. Because at his core, Wan Huainan was a man who always chose the path of least resistance, the option that required the least honesty and the least courage. But even after everything, even after being caught red-handed, even after admitting his betrayal and his schemes, Huainan still tried to justify himself. Weiran, why be so stubborn about it? He had said, his voice full of false reasonableness. Yes, I cheated. But does that mean no love? I just made a mistake all men tend to make. Baby, forgive me. Give me another chance. Do not divorce me, all men. He called his calculated, years-long deception a mistake that all men make. As if cheating was just something that happened, like catching a cold or forgetting an anniversary. As if the deliberate choice to betray, to lie, to steal, to desecrate everything we had together was just an unfortunate lapse in judgment that I should overlook, and then he had tried to shift the blame. It was her. She seduced me, he had said, pointing at Shanshan. If not her, none of this happens, but Shanshan, finally showing some backbone, had pushed back. I seduced you, really? Wan Huainan, you did. You kept throwing cash at me. You begged to stay with you. You cheated, means you are just trash. Why blame me? And she was right. Whatever her sins, and they were many, the primary responsibility for this betrayal lay with my husband. He was the one who had made vows to me. He was the one who had promised to forsake all others. He was the one who had chosen to betray that trust, but I wasn't interested in assigning percentage points of blame. They were both guilty. They had both participated in my humiliation. And they would both pay. I had made them slap each other then, had watched as Huainan struck the woman he claimed to love, all in a desperate bid to win back my favor. The sound of his hand meeting her face, the look of betrayal in her eyes, the pathetic hope in his eyes that this show of loyalty would somehow fix things, it was grotesque and satisfying in equal measure. I only said I might spare you, I had told him after he finished. When did I say I forgive you? Because I wouldn't forgive. Not now. Not ever. Some betrayals are too deep, too fundamental, too destructive to ever be forgiven. And this was one of them. Huainan had tried every manipulation in his playbook. He had cried, begged, made promises, played the victim. When I refused to give him a generous divorce settlement, when I told him he would leave with nothing, he had turned self-righteous. Will you not give me a way out, he had said, as if I was the unreasonable one. As if I was the one being cruel by not rewarding his years of theft and betrayal with millions of yuan, but I had evidence. Recordings of his confessions. Documents of his crimes. And most importantly, I had the prenuptial agreement. You see, my father had been wise. He had seen something in Wan Huainan that I had been too in love to see. And before he agreed to our marriage, he had insisted that Huainan sign a prenup. At the time, Huainan had acted like it was an insult, like my father was accusing him of being a gold digger. But he had signed it, because what choice did he have if he wanted access to my wealth? That prenup stipulated that in the event of divorce, Wan Huainan would receive nothing. Not half of my assets, not a settlement, not even the clothes on his back if I chose to be vindictive. Nothing, Mr. Wei. Before you married Wan Huainan, the late chairman told me about the prenuptial he signed, my lawyer had explained to the assembled crowd. It clearly states that even if you divorce, he gets nothing. Not a bit. The look on Huainan's face when he heard this was almost worth everything I had been through. Almost. Because he had genuinely forgotten about the prenup, or had convinced himself it wouldn't matter, or had simply believed that I loved him too much to ever enforce it. And now, faced with the reality that his 5-year con was going to end with him exactly where he started, with nothing, he finally understood what he had lost, but the prenup was just the beginning of his problems. Because while he had been playing rich man with my money, while he had been living high on the illusion of success, he had also been committing crimes. Wan Huainan all these years has used your name to take bribes outside, throwing his weight around, my lawyer had continued, laying out the evidence we had gathered. And used his post to fill his own pockets. He even moved company funds, up to 100 million yuan, 100 million yuan. He had embezzled 100 million yuan from my company. My father's company. The business that represented generations of my family's work and sacrifice. And he had stolen from it like it was his personal piggy bank. That was a crime. Not just a moral failing, not just a betrayal of trust, but an actual criminal offense that carried serious prison time. And I had all the evidence I needed to put him away. For all the crap you pulled, I can call the cops and make you rot in prison for life, I had told him, my voice calm and matter of fact, and I did. I called the police. Right there, in front of everyone, I called the authorities and reported my husband for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Watched as the color drained from his face, as he realized that this wasn't just about losing money or status, this was about losing his freedom, baby. I was so damn wrong. Can you forgive me? Please do not call the cops. If you call, I'm ruined, he had begged, all pretense of dignity gone, reduced to a sniveling coward who finally understood the consequences of his actions. but it was too late. Too late for apologies, too late for promises, too late for anything but justice. The police came. They arrested Juan Huainan right there in the winery, in front of his mistress and her friends, in front of my staff, in front of everyone who had witnessed his crimes. They led him away in handcuffs, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, no joy. Just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and a sense of profound loss, because yes, he had betrayed me. Yes, he had used me. Yes, he deserved everything that was coming to him. But he had also been my husband. I had loved him. I had built a life with him. And watching that life be destroyed, even knowing it had been built on lies, was still painful. After they took him away, I had the movers come. I had them remove everything that had belonged to Huainan from my home, every gift he had given me, every reminder of our marriage. And I had it all burned. Every photograph, every memento, every piece of clothing, all of it reduced to ash. Chairman Wei, are you sure about this? Xiaoyi had asked me as we watched the flames consume my past. Once these are destroyed, could not come back, but I didn't want them to come back. I didn't want any reminders of the 5 years I had wasted on a man who had never loved me. Who had seen me as nothing but a resource to be exploited, had a failed marriage, I had said simply. Not important. What matters is I have the courage to start again, and I did start again. I threw myself into running Xingshi Group with renewed focus and energy. No more hiding behind Huainan, no more pretending to be less than I was, no more compromising my own success for the sake of a man's ego. I was the chairman, openly and proudly, and I was going to run my company the way my father had trained me to. The divorce was finalized quickly. Huainan had no grounds to contest it, not with all the evidence of his crimes and his infidelity. He tried, of course. Tried to negotiate. Tried to guilt me, tried every manipulation he could think of. But I was done being manipulated. I visited him once in jail, bringing the divorce papers for him to sign. He looked terrible, pale, gaunt, broken. Prison was not being kind to him, and I felt no pity. Honey, I will not divorce. I love you, he had said, still trying even then to hold on to what he had lost, but his words meant nothing. They had never meant anything. If you do not sign, I will sue for divorce, I had told him, my voice cold and final. If you feel any guilt for me, sign it, and we part in peace. If all goes as planned, this is the last time I see you, and he did sign. Because what choice did he have? He could fight and lose anyway. Or he could sign and at least retain some shred of dignity. He chose to sign. As I walked out of that prison, divorce papers in hand, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For 5 years, I had bent myself into shapes I didn't recognize, had dimmed my own light, had made myself smaller, all for a man who had never appreciated any of it, who had seen my sacrifice as nothing but weakness to exploit, but no more. I was free. Free of him, free of his lies, free of the constant need to pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. The business world took notice. Chairman Wei of Xingshi Group was no longer hiding behind her husband. She was out front. Making decisions, closing deals, proving that the success everyone had attributed to Juan Huainan had been hers all along. And the company flourished under my open leadership in a way it never had when I was hiding. Shanshan tried to contact me after Huainan's arrest. Tried to apologize, tried to beg forgiveness for the damage she had done. But I had no interest in hearing from her. She had made her choices, had destroyed property worth tens of millions, and she would pay for it. I sued her for the damages, and when she couldn't pay, and of course she couldn't pay, I had her wages garnished for the rest of her working life. She would spend decades paying for those few hours of malicious destruction. And I felt no guilt about it. The directors who had tried to support Huainan's takeover of my company found themselves out of positions. I cleaned house thoroughly, removing anyone who had shown themselves willing to betray me for personal gain. New directors were appointed, people I had vetted carefully, people who understood that loyalty and integrity were not negotiable. Time passed. The wounds healed, though they left scars. I learned to trust again, though more carefully. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to whether someone loved me, that I didn't need to dim my own light to make others comfortable, that strength wasn't found in sacrifice but in knowing when to stand firm. Looking back now, I can see that the worst thing Juan Huainan did to me wasn't the cheating or the stealing or even the years of lies. The worst thing was that he made me doubt myself. Made me feel like I needed to hide my success, like being powerful and capable was something to be ashamed of, like I should apologize for being who I was, but I learned. Oh, I learned. I learned that real love doesn't ask you to be less than you are. I learned that trust, once broken so completely, can never be fully repaired. I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from someone who is destroying you, even if you still love them, and I learned that anger, properly channeled, can be a clarifying force. The rage I felt that day in the winery, watching my husband's mistress destroy my father's legacy while my husband ordered my own staff to throw me out, that rage burned away all the illusions, all the excuses, all the comfortable lies I had been telling myself. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also freed me. Would I change what happened if I could? Would I go back and never marry Juan Huainan, never give him access to my life and my money and my heart? I don't know. Because as much as it cost me, as much pain as it caused, that experience taught me things I might never have learned otherwise. It showed me my own strength, my own capacity to survive betrayal and come out stronger. It taught me the value of loyalty by showing me the cost of its absence, and it taught me that I am enough. Just me, just Wei Ran, without a husband to define me or validate me or give me permission to be who I am. I am enough. I always was. I just needed to learn that lesson in the hardest way possible, so yes. I am angry. I will probably always carry some anger about what was done to me, about the years that were stolen, about the trust that was violated so completely. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that I found out when I did, grateful that I had the resources and the strength to fight back, grateful that I didn't waste more years on a man who saw me as nothing but a means to an end. The pain has faded but the lessons remain. And I am better for them, even if I paid a terrible price to learn them. I am stronger, wiser, more careful, more authentic. I am fully, completely, unapologetically myself. And that is worth more than all the false love and empty promises in the world. This is my story. The story of betrayal and survival. The story of a woman who lost everything and found herself. The story of pain that transformed into power. And it is not a story of victimhood, though I was certainly victimized. It is a story of strength, the strength to face the truth, the strength to demand justice, the strength to rebuild from ashes. If you take nothing else from my story, take this: you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are not required to accept betrayal with grace. You are not required to forgive what is unforgivable. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to demand justice. You are allowed to put yourself first, because at the end of the day, the only person who will always be there for you is you. The only person whose opinion of you truly matters is you. The only person who can give you permission to be fully yourself is you, so be yourself. Be angry when anger is warranted. Be strong when strength is required. Be unforgiving when forgiveness would only enable further harm. Be exactly who you are, unapologetically and completely, and if someone tries to dim your light, if someone tries to make you smaller to accommodate their fragile ego, if someone tries to steal your achievements and your identity and your worth, burn them. Burn them to the ground with the same cold fury I brought to bear on Juan Huainan. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Out of the recognition that some people are toxic, some relationships are poisonous, and some betrayals cannot and should not be forgiven. I am Wei Ran. I am the chairman of Xingshi Group. I am my father's daughter. I am a woman who survived betrayal and came out stronger. I am a woman who learned to value herself when no one else would. I am a woman who chose justice over peace, truth over comfortable lies, strength over submission, and I am free. That is my story. That is my truth. And I tell it not for sympathy, I neither want nor need it, but as a warning and a beacon. A warning to those who would use and betray, that consequences are real and justice is possible. And a beacon to those who have been betrayed, that survival is possible, that strength can be found in the darkest moments, that you can rebuild yourself into something even better than you were before. The scars remain. They always will. But they are badges of honor now, proof that I survived something that could have destroyed me. Proof that I chose myself when it mattered most. Proof that I am stronger than the worst thing anyone ever did to me. And if Juan Huainan taught me anything in our 5 years together, it was this: never trust someone more than they've earned. Never give more than you receive. Never make yourself smaller for someone else's comfort. And never, ever forget that you are valuable exactly as you are. These lessons were expensive. They cost me years of my life, millions of yuan, and a piece of my ability to trust. But they were worth it. Because now I know who I am. Now I know what I'm worth. Now I know that I can survive anything, and that knowledge is power that no one can ever take from me again. This is my story. The story of how I died as a fool and was reborn as a force. The story of how betrayal broke me open and revealed the steel underneath. The story of how I learned that the most important love isn't romantic love, but self-love. The story of how I became the woman I was always meant to be, and I wouldn't change it for the world. They tell you that time heals all wounds. They're lying. Time doesn't heal wounds, it just teaches you how to live with the scars. And my scars run deep, carved into the very fabric of who I am, permanent reminders of the 5 years I spent loving a man who saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. But here's what they don't tell you about scars: they're also proof that you survived. Every mark on my soul is evidence that I endured something that should have destroyed me and came out the other side. Not unscathed, I'll never be unscathed, but alive. Stronger. Changed in ways both terrible and necessary. It's been 3 years since that day in the winery. 3 years since I stood in pools of spilled wine and broken glass and watched my marriage disintegrate in real time. 3 years since I looked into the eyes of my husband's mistress and saw my own naivety reflected back at me. 3 years since I made the decision to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. 3 years. It sounds like such a long time, and yet it feels like yesterday. The memories are still sharp, still painful when I let myself touch them. I can still hear the sound of those wine bottles shattering. Still see the smug satisfaction on Shanshan's face as she ordered her friends to destroy my father's collection. Still feel the cold shock of realization when I understood that my husband had never loved me, had only ever seen me as a means to an end, but I can also see how far I've come. How much I've changed. How the woman standing here today bears little resemblance to the woman who walked into that winery 3 years ago, still clinging to illusions and hoping against hope that there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, some way to fix what was broken. That woman is gone. She died that day, in fire and rage and devastating truth. And from her ashes, someone new emerged. Someone harder, yes. Someone more cynical, certainly. But also someone more authentic, more powerful, more fully herself than she had ever been allowed to be. I am not the woman Juan Huainan married. That woman was soft, accommodating, willing to diminish herself for the sake of a relationship. That woman believed that love meant sacrifice, that being a good wife meant supporting your husband even at the cost of your own identity. That woman thought that if she just loved hard enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, she could make a man love her back. That woman was a fool. I am not her anymore. I will never be her again. And while I sometimes mourn the loss of that innocent, trusting version of myself, I don't regret her death. She had to die so that I could live. Really live, not just exist in the shadow of someone else's ambitions and lies. The aftermath of that day was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. The public revelation of my husband's betrayal, the lawsuit. The criminal charges, the divorce, it all played out in the public eye in a way that was humiliating and excruciating. Yunqing is a big city, but the social circles at the top are small, and everyone had an opinion about Chairman Wei and her cheating husband. Some people were sympathetic. They understood that I had been wronged, that I was the victim in this scenario. They offered support, understanding, solidarity. Those people were kind, and I appreciated them, but their sympathy was also exhausting. Because sympathy requires you to remain in the victim role, to continue being the wronged party, to define yourself by what was done to you rather than by what you did in response. Others were judgmental. They asked why I hadn't known. Why I hadn't seen the signs. Why I had let my husband represent himself as chairman when I was the one with the power. They implied that I had been weak, stupid, willfully blind. Those people made me angry, but their judgment also contained a kernel of truth that I couldn't ignore. I had been blind. I had chosen not to see. And while that didn't excuse what was done to me, it meant I bore some responsibility for allowing it to continue as long as it had, and then there were the opportunists. The people who saw my vulnerability as a chance to advance their own agendas. Business rivals who thought I would be distracted and tried to poach my clients. Men who thought a newly divorced woman would be desperate for attention and validation. Former friends of Huainan who tried to maintain relationships with both of us, as if neutrality was an option when someone had stolen 5 years of my life. I cut them all off. Ruthlessly, completely, without hesitation. Because one thing I learned from my marriage to Juan Huainan was that I had been far too tolerant of people who didn't have my best interests at heart. I had let people take advantage of me because I wanted to be liked, to be seen as generous and understanding. But generosity without boundaries is just self-destruction in a pretty package. So I became ruthless. Not cruel, I never wanted to be cruel, but absolutely unwavering in my standards for the people I allowed in my life. Loyalty became non-negotiable. Honesty became essential. And anyone who couldn't meet those standards found themselves on the outside looking in. The business world noticed. Chairman Wei, they said, had changed. She was harder now. Less forgiving. More demanding. Some people said it with approval, others with criticism, but all of them said it with respect. Because hard or not, demanding or not, I was effective. Under my open leadership, without Huainan's incompetence and embezzlement dragging us down, Xingshi Group flourished. We expanded into new markets. We closed deals that had been languishing. We innovated in ways we never had when I was busy protecting my husband's ego. And with every success, with every quarter of growth, with every new partnership and expansion, I proved that the company's success had always been mine. That Juan Huainan had contributed nothing but his ability to spend money and take credit, but the professional success, satisfying as it was, couldn't fill the void left by the personal devastation. Because no matter how well the company did, no matter how respected I became in the business community, I still went home to an empty house every night. Still woke up alone every morning. Still had to face the reality that I was 32 years old. Divorced, and so damaged by betrayal that the thought of trusting someone again made me physically ill. The loneliness was crushing at times. Not because I needed a man, I had learned quite definitively that I didn't, but because I missed companionship. Missed having someone to share my day with. Missed the comfortable intimacy of a long-term relationship, even if that intimacy had been built on lies, and I was angry about that. Angry that Huainan had not only stolen my money and my trust, but also my ability to enjoy the simple pleasure of human connection. Angry that his betrayal had poisoned even my memories of the good times we'd had, because now I couldn't remember a single moment without wondering if he had been thinking about her. Planning his exit strategy, calculating how much more he could take from me. Some nights, the anger was so strong it felt like it would consume me. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and feel rage burning through my veins like acid. Rage at Huainan for using me. Rage at Shanshan for being so casually cruel. Rage at myself for being so blind. Rage at the universe for letting this happen to me when I had tried so hard to be a good person, a good wife, a good daughter carrying on my father's legacy. On those nights, I would sometimes go to the winery. To the lilac estate, where it had all fallen apart. I had it completely restored after the destruction, every broken bottle replaced with something equally rare and valuable. Every stain cleaned, every trace of that terrible day erased. Except I couldn't erase it from my memory. Couldn't walk through those halls without hearing Shanshan's laughter and seeing my husband's betrayal play out in my mind, but I went anyway. Because I refused to let them take that from me too. The winery was my father's legacy, my inheritance, my connection to the man who had loved me unconditionally and taught me everything I knew about business and integrity and the value of hard work. And I would be damned if I let Juan Huainon's betrayal turn that sacred place into nothing but a monument to my pain, so I reclaimed it. Slowly, painfully, deliberately. I held board meetings there. Entertained important clients there. Walked through the vineyards and remembered my father's voice telling me about patience and craft and the way time transforms simple grapes into something extraordinary. I poured my memories of betrayal out like the wine that had been spilled, and I filled the space with new experiences, new associations, new meanings. It wasn't easy. Nothing about recovery was easy. But it was necessary. Because if I let the betrayal define that space, define my memories, define my life, then Huainan would have won. He would have taken not just 5 years of my present, but all of my past and all of my future. And I couldn't let that happen. Juan Huainan went to prison. As he deserved. 15 years for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Not long enough, in my opinion, but the law is what it is. I didn't attend his trial. I had no desire to see him again, to give him any more of my time or attention. My lawyers handled everything, presented the overwhelming evidence of his crimes, and secured his conviction without my presence. I heard through my lawyer that he tried to make a statement at his sentencing. Tried to address me, to offer some final apology or explanation. But I had the lawyer inform the court that I had no interest in hearing anything Juan Huainan had to say. His words had lost all value to me. They were just sounds, empty of meaning or truth. He wrote to me from prison. Multiple letters, delivered through my lawyer since I had made sure he had no way to contact me directly. I never read them. Never even opened them. Just had them filed away as potential evidence should he ever try to appeal or cause problems. His words couldn't hurt me anymore, but I also had no interest in giving him the satisfaction of knowing whether they reached me or not. Shanshan's fate was less dramatic but perhaps more fitting. The lawsuit I filed against her resulted in a judgment for the full value of the destroyed wine, 53 million yuan. She couldn't pay it, of course. Didn't have anywhere close to that kind of money. So her wages were garnished. And she was forced to take on multiple jobs just to survive while paying back her debt at a rate that meant she would be paying for decades. I heard she tried to declare bankruptcy, but the judge ruled that the debt was the result of willful destruction of property and couldn't be discharged. She was stuck with it, a weight she would carry for the rest of her life. Every paycheck, every bit of income, a significant portion would come to me. Not that I needed the money, 53 million was a lot, but I had recovered from the loss easily enough. But the principle mattered. Actions have consequences, and Shanshan would spend the rest of her life learning that lesson. Part of me felt guilty about that. Part of me wondered if I was being vindictive, if I should show mercy to someone who had been, in her own way, as much a victim of Juan Huainon's manipulation as I was. But then I would remember her face as she ordered her friends to smash my wine. Remember her casual cruelty, her gleeful destruction, her absolute confidence that she could do whatever she wanted because her boyfriend was powerful and rich. She hadn't been a victim in that moment. She had been a willing participant in my humiliation. And if she was paying the price for it now, well, that was justice. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference, and it mattered to me to understand that difference. The directors who had tried to support Huainan's takeover were removed from their positions. As I mentioned. But I didn't destroy them completely. I had enough evidence of their disloyalty and poor judgment to make sure they never worked in corporate leadership again. But I chose a different path. I let them resign quietly, with their reputations mostly intact, on the condition that they acknowledge their error in judgment and never speak publicly about the incident. Most of them took the deal gratefully. A few tried to fight it, to maintain that they had been acting in the company's best interest. Those few found out exactly how thoroughly I could destroy someone when I chose to, because that was another thing I learned from this experience. Power is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used constructively or destructively. For too long, I had been afraid of my own power. Afraid to use it fully, afraid to be seen as aggressive or ambitious or ruthless. I had let Huainan front for me because I didn't want to deal with the social consequences of being a powerful woman in a male-dominated business world, but after everything fell apart, I realized that those social consequences were nothing compared to the consequences of hiding. If I had been more visible, more assertive, more willing to claim credit for my own achievements, maybe Huainan never would have been able to construct his elaborate fiction. Maybe Shanshan would have known from the start that he was nothing but a kept man living off his wife's success. Maybe the whole disaster could have been avoided, or maybe not. Maybe Huainan would have found a way to betray me regardless. Maybe his fundamental character, his greed, his vanity, his willingness to lie and steal and cheat, would have manifested somehow no matter what I did. But at least I wouldn't have enabled it by hiding my own light, so I stopped hiding. I became the public face of Xingshi Group in a way I never had been before. I gave interviews, made speeches, attended conferences and galas and networking events. I let the world see that Chairman Wei was not just a title, not just a name on paper, but a real person with vision and intelligence and the ability to lead. And you know what I discovered? Most people didn't care that I was a woman. Most people were just impressed by my competence. The ones who had a problem with a female chairman were generally the same kinds of people who would have found some other reason to dismiss me anyway. And their opinions simply didn't matter. What mattered was the work. What mattered was the results. What mattered was building on my father's legacy and creating something even greater than what he had left me. And I was doing that. Every day, every decision, every success was a tribute to him and a repudiation of everyone who had underestimated me. But the professional success, as validating as it was, couldn't fully heal the personal wounds. Because the hardest part of betrayal isn't the loss of the person who betrayed you, it's the loss of trust in yourself. It's the constant second-guessing, the endless replay of every moment wondering how you missed the signs, the creeping doubt about your own judgment and perception. I found myself questioning everything. Every decision I made, every person I trusted, every instinct I had, all of it was filtered through the lens of having been so catastrophically wrong about Huainan. If I could be that wrong about the person I was closest to, the person I shared my life and my bed and my deepest secrets with, how could I trust my judgment about anything else? It was paralyzing at times. I would be in a meeting, about to close a major deal, and suddenly wonder if I was missing something crucial. If the person across the table was lying to me the way Huainan had lied. If I was about to make another terrible mistake that would cost me everything, I had to learn to trust myself again. Had to rebuild that fundamental confidence that I knew what I was doing, that my instincts were sound, that I could navigate the world without constantly second-guessing every decision. It was harder than recovering from the betrayal itself. Harder than rebuilding my public image or restructuring the company or any of the external challenges I faced. Because self-trust isn't something that can be restored through logic or evidence or external validation. It's something that has to be rebuilt slowly, through experience, through making decisions and seeing them work out, through learning that you can survive even when things go wrong. I started small. Made minor decisions and followed through on them without second-guessing. Chose what to have for dinner and didn't change my mind. Picked an outfit and wore it without wondering if I looked foolish. Scheduled meetings and trusted my judgment about who needed to attend. Tiny decisions, meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but crucial for rebuilding my confidence. Because each one was a small proof that I could choose and commit and move forward without being paralyzed by fear and doubt. Gradually, I worked up to bigger decisions. Hired new employees based on my assessment of their capabilities. Approved major contracts based on my evaluation of the risks and benefits. Made strategic decisions about the company's direction based on my vision for its future, and most of them worked out. Not all, no one has a perfect track record, and pretending otherwise is just setting yourself up for more self-doubt. But most of them worked out. And the ones that didn't, I survived. I made corrections, learned from my mistakes, and moved forward. Each success, each survival, added another brick to the foundation of self-trust I was rebuilding. And slowly, painfully, over months and years, I began to feel like myself again. Not the naive woman I had been before, that woman was gone forever, but a new version of myself. Wiser, warier, but also stronger and more confident in ways the old version never was. Therapy helped. I resisted it at first, because admitting you need help feels like admitting weakness, and I was so tired of feeling weak. But eventually I accepted that healing from this kind of trauma isn't something you can do alone, no matter how strong you are. So I found a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma and intimate partner abuse, because yes, what Huainan did was a form of abuse, emotional and financial abuse that was no less damaging for being non-physical. In therapy, I learned to name what had happened to me. Learned the terminology for the manipulation tactics Huainan had used. Gaslighting. Love bombing. Financial abuse. Triangulation. All these terms that described experiences I had lived through but hadn't known how to categorize or understand, and understanding helped. It didn't make the pain go away, but it made it make sense. Made me realize that what happened wasn't because I was stupid or blind or inadequate. It was because I had been targeted by someone skilled in manipulation, someone who had studied me and figured out exactly what buttons to push to keep me compliant and giving. That realization was both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it meant the failure wasn't entirely mine. Terrifying because it meant that all my intelligence and education and success hadn't protected me from being victimized. That being smart and capable wasn't enough to prevent someone from exploiting you if they were determined enough and skilled enough at deception, but my therapist helped me understand that while I couldn't have prevented what Huainan did, his choices were his own, and no amount of vigilance on my part could have stopped him from choosing to betray. I could learn from the experience. Could identify the red flags I had ignored, the boundaries I had failed to enforce, the ways I had compromised myself that made it easier for him to exploit me. Not to blame myself. That was important. Not to say that any of this was my fault or that I deserved it or that I had brought it on myself. But to understand my own vulnerabilities so I could protect them better in the future. To recognize the patterns that had made me susceptible so I could avoid falling into them again. One of the biggest patterns my therapist helped me identify was my tendency to make myself smaller to accommodate others. To hide my achievements, to downplay my intelligence, to defer to men even when I knew more than they did. All of these behaviors had been trained into me by a society that tells women to be modest, to be supportive, to not threaten male egos. And all of those behaviors had made it easy for Huainan to steal my identity. If I had never hidden my position as chairman, he couldn't have claimed it. If I had never deferred to him in public, people wouldn't have believed he was the one with power. If I had never diminished myself, there would have been no space for him to inflate himself at my expense, so I stopped. Stopped making myself smaller. Stopped apologizing for my success. Stopped qualifying my achievements or crediting others for work I had done. It felt arrogant at first, uncomfortable and wrong. But my therapist reminded me that it's not arrogant to tell the truth about yourself. It's not boastful to acknowledge your own accomplishments. It's just honest, and honesty, I was learning, was the foundation of everything. Honesty with yourself about who you are and what you want. Honesty with others about your boundaries and expectations. Honesty in business dealings, in personal relationships, in every interaction. Huainan had been able to deceive me so thoroughly because I had been willing to accept his lies. Not consciously, I hadn't known they were lies, but I had ignored my own doubts and questions because I wanted to believe him. Because believing him was easier than facing the possibility that the man I loved was using me, so I committed to never doing that again. To listening to my doubts instead of suppressing them. To asking hard questions even when I didn't want to hear the answers. To facing uncomfortable truths instead of hiding from them behind comfortable lies. It made me harder. Less easy to be around, probably. Less warm and accommodating and eager to please. But it also made me more authentic, more genuinely myself than I had ever been. And the people who were put off by that, who preferred the soft and pliable version of me that had been so easy to exploit, were exactly the people I needed to keep at a distance, the people who mattered, the people who genuinely cared about me, accepted the new version of me without hesitation. Xiao Yi, my assistant who had stood by me through everything. adapted seamlessly. She had always known I was the one with power, had always treated me with the respect my position deserved. The new me, more openly powerful and assertive, just matched what she had always known to be true. My actual friends, the ones who had liked me for myself rather than for what I could do for them, were relieved. They had watched me diminish myself for Huainan and had hated it, but hadn't known how to tell me without seeming to criticize my marriage. Now that the marriage was over and I was reclaiming myself, they were thrilled to see the return of the strong, capable woman they had always known I could be, and new people in my life, people I met after the divorce, knew only this version of me. To them, I was simply Chairman Wei, powerful, successful, independent. They had no context for the woman I used to be, no basis for comparison. And their acceptance of me as I was now, without any nostalgia for a softer version, was validating in a way I hadn't expected, but I still struggled with intimacy. With letting people get close. Because closeness meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant risk, and risk meant the possibility of being hurt again. And I had been hurt so badly, so deeply, so thoroughly that the thought of opening myself up to that possibility again was almost unbearable. I tried dating, about a year after the divorce. Well-meaning friends set me up. Insisted that I needed to get back out there, that not all men were like Huainan. And intellectually, I knew they were right. I knew that Huainan's betrayal didn't mean all men were cheaters and liars. I knew that it was possible to find someone trustworthy and genuine. But knowing it intellectually and believing it emotionally are two very different things. The dates were disasters, every single one. I couldn't relax, couldn't stop analyzing every word and gesture for signs of deception. Couldn't enjoy the moment because I was too busy protecting myself from potential future pain. The men could sense it, of course. Could feel my guardedness, my suspicion, my inability to simply be present. Some of them were patient, tried to break through my walls. But I couldn't let them. Didn't want to let them. Because letting someone in meant giving them the power to hurt me, and I had sworn never to be that vulnerable again. Eventually I stopped trying. Accepted that I might be one of those people who has one great love and one great betrayal and then lives the rest of their life alone. It wasn't what I had imagined for myself, wasn't the future I had dreamed of when I was younger and still believed in fairy tales. But it was better than the alternative of trusting the wrong person again. My therapist challenged me on that. Asked me if I really wanted to let Huainan's betrayal dictate the entire rest of my life. Pointed out that by refusing to ever trust again, I was giving him ongoing power over me. That I was letting him win by turning me into a closed-off, isolated person when I had once been open and warm, and she was right. I knew she was right. But knowing doesn't always translate to being able to change. The fear was too deep, too visceral. And maybe that was okay. Maybe some wounds are so deep that they never fully heal. Maybe some betrayals are so profound that they permanently alter your ability to trust. And maybe that's not weakness, maybe it's just reality, but I refused to let it make me bitter. That was the line I wouldn't cross. I could be guarded, could be cautious, could be skeptical. But I would not become cynical and hateful. Would not let Huainan's betrayal poison my entire worldview, so I found other sources of fulfillment. Poured myself into my work, yes, but also into other pursuits. I traveled, visiting vineyards around the world and adding to my collection with wines that I chose myself, that carried no painful associations. I learned new things, took a course in art history, started studying Mandarin calligraphy, picked up skills that had nothing to do with business or profit or achievement. I built friendships, real ones, based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than social climbing or business advantage. I spent time with people who knew my whole story and liked me anyway. Who didn't try to fix me or change me or push me to move on before I was ready, and slowly, gradually, life became bearable again. Then became tolerable. Then became actually good. Not the uncomplicated happiness I had believed in before, not the naive contentment of someone who hasn't yet been devastated. But a more complex, more hard-won kind of satisfaction. The satisfaction of surviving something terrible and building a life worth living despite it. 3 years. 3 years of rebuilding, of healing, of learning to be myself again. 3 years of slowly transforming from a victim into a survivor, into someone who was more than the worst thing that ever happened to her. And you know what I realized? Juan Huainan didn't destroy me. He tried. He certainly damaged me, hurt me in ways that will probably never fully heal. But he didn't destroy me. Because I'm still here. Still strong. Still capable. Still building and creating and living fully. That's my revenge, really. Not the prison sentence or the lawsuit or any of the legal consequences I brought down on him. Those were justice, necessary and appropriate. But my real revenge is this: I survived. I thrived. I became more than I was before. While he rotted in a cell contemplating his own stupidity and greed, he thought he was using me as a stepping stone to success. Thought he could steal my identity and my money and then discard me when he was done. But in the end, he was nothing without me. Just a mediocre man with delusions of grandeur and no actual skills or abilities. And now everyone knows it. Meanwhile, I'm here. Running a successful company. Living in the house we once shared, but with every trace of him erased. Walking through the winery he defiled and reclaiming it as my own sacred space. Existing in the world as fully, completely, unapologetically myself, that's victory. Not perfection, I'm not perfect, not healed, not fully recovered and probably never will be. But I'm here, I'm strong, and I'm living a life that matters. A life built on truth instead of lies. A life where I don't have to hide who I am or diminish myself for someone else's comfort. If I could go back and talk to the woman I was 3 years ago, the woman walking into that winery with no idea that her life was about to explode, I don't know what I would say. Part of me wants to warn her, to tell her to check Huainan's phone, to dig deeper into the company finances, to protect herself before it's too late. But another part of me thinks that maybe she needed to learn this lesson. Needed to have her illusions shattered so completely that she had no choice but to rebuild herself from scratch. Because the woman she was then, as kind and loving and well-intentioned as she was also naive and overly accommodating and so afraid of her own power that she hid from it. That woman could never have become the leader I am now. Could never have taken Xingshi Group to the heights we've reached. Could never have learned to value herself properly, to set boundaries, to demand respect instead of hoping for it. So maybe the betrayal, as devastating as it was also necessary. Not in the sense that I deserved it or that it was good, it was neither. But in the sense that sometimes we need to be broken completely before we can rebuild ourselves into something stronger. That's what I tell myself on the hard days, anyway. The days when the loneliness feels crushing. When I see couples who seem genuinely happy and feel that sharp pang of envy and loss. When I remember what it felt like to love without fear, before I learned that love can be weaponized against you, on those days, I remind myself that I'm not alone because I'm unlovable or damaged or broken beyond repair. I'm alone because I'm choosing to protect myself, and that's valid. I'm choosing standards and boundaries over compromise, and that's healthy. I'm choosing to be fully myself even if that means being by myself. And that's strength, not weakness, and maybe someday I'll meet someone who can be trusted with my guarded heart. Someone who has their own scars and understands why trust has to be earned slowly and carefully. Someone who sees my strength as attractive rather than threatening, who values my success rather than resenting it, who wants a partner instead of a provider, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life alone, building my business and my legacy and finding fulfillment in work and friendships and pursuits that don't require me to make myself vulnerable to romantic betrayal again, and you know what? Either way, I'll be okay. Because I've learned that I don't need another person to complete me or validate me or give my life meaning. I'm complete on my own. Always was, really, I just didn't believe it before. That's perhaps the greatest gift this nightmare gave me, the knowledge of my own sufficiency. The understanding that I can stand alone. The confidence that I don't need anyone or anything to make me whole, because I already am whole, damaged, yes. Scarred, certainly. Changed irrevocably from who I was before. But whole nonetheless. Complete in myself in a way I never was when I was trying to be half of a couple, trying to fit myself into the shape of someone's ideal wife. I am Wei Ran. I am the chairman of Xingshi Group, the daughter of a great man, the owner of a legacy that spans generations. I am a survivor of betrayal. A fighter who refused to stay down, a phoenix who rose from ashes that should have consumed her. I am angry. Yes, I'm still angry, and maybe I always will be. Angry at what was done to me, angry at the years that were stolen, angry at the violation of trust and love and everything I thought was sacred. And that's okay. Anger, properly directed, is not a weakness. It's fuel. It's motivation. It's the fire that keeps you warm when everything else is cold. I am sad. Sad for the loss of innocence, sad for the death of dreams, sad for the woman I was who believed the best of people and paid dearly for it. That sadness is part of me now, a permanent resident in my heart. But it doesn't define me. It's just one color in a palette that includes many others: strength, pride, determination, resilience. I am grateful. Strangely, impossibly grateful for everything that happened. Not glad it happened, I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone. But grateful for what it taught me, for who it forced me to become, for the clarity that came from having all illusions burned away, and I am hopeful. Not the naive hope of someone who has never been hurt, but the hard-won hope of someone who has survived the worst and knows she can survive anything. Hope that the future, whatever it holds, will be lived on my own terms. Hope that the best parts of my life are still ahead of me, not behind me in a past built on lies. This is my truth. This is my story. This is the conclusion of one chapter and the beginning of another. The chapter of victimhood is closed. The chapter of survival is complete. Now begins the chapter of thriving, of building a life so full and rich and meaningful that the betrayal becomes just one event in a much larger story, not the defining moment but just one moment among many. I am Wei Ran, and I am not finished yet. Not finished growing, not finished building, not finished becoming whoever I'm meant to be. The betrayal tried to end my story, but instead it just redirected it. Took me down a path I never chose, but one that led me to myself more surely than the comfortable path ever could have, and for that, only for that, I can almost forgive what was done to me. Not forgive Huainan or Shanshan or their casual cruelty. But forgive the universe for allowing it to happen. Because it brought me here. To this moment. To this version of myself. To this hard-won peace with my own scars. I am not who I was. I will never be who I was. But I am who I am, and that is enough. More than enough, that is my conclusion. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not closure, but opening. Not forgetting, but moving forward while carrying the weight of memory. I am scarred. I am strong. I am standing. And I am just getting started. This is Wei Ran, signing off from this chapter of her life and walking into the next one with her head held high and her eyes open wide. Learning from the past, living in the present, and building a future that belongs to her and her alone.